Hello everyone, I'm Karen from Sew and Save, and we're here today in my sewing studio because we are starting a new block of the month this year. This is the Sew What block of the month, and I just want to welcome everybody. We're so happy to have you. This year we're going to do the aPult block of the month by Deb's Cats and Quilts. Yes, and this is a great project. We're going to make one block every month, and it uses the Cat's Cradle ruler and her instruction guide. This project makes, there are several different varieties that you can make of this project. So you can see there's several different options on the back of the pattern, as well as the front for laying out your blocks. You can make a queen size, you can make a lap, you can make a king size. So I'm going to be working on a king size because I'm making 2 blocks every month. So if you want a queen or a king, you're probably going to want to make 2 blocks every month. So I'm going to show you today how to make the first block. I'm using some Kansas Troubles fabric, and every month you will use 4 colored fabrics and 1 background fabric. Okay, and her instructions are written using red, gold, blue, and brown. Now you can use any colors you want, but just make sure that you know which color is going to be your red, what's going to be your blue, what's going to be your brown, and what's going to be, what I missed, blue, brown, gold. What's going to be your gold. So you're going to need 4 different colors every month, and you can switch it up, you can mix it, match it, do whatever you want, make it as scrappy as you want. Every month my colors will be gold, red, blue, and brown, just to make it easy for you to follow her instructions and to follow along with what I'm doing. So I'm using my Kansas Troubles fabrics, and boy, are they going to make a beautiful quilt in the end. So the first thing we're going to do is pull out our instruction sheet for block number 1. It's clearly written. Every page, every block, every month tells you what size pieces to cut from your gold, your blue, your red, and your brown. And then don't forget your background, because you're going to need that. So first thing you're going to do is cut out your pieces. So you're going to start with your gold, and then you'll cut 4 red rectangles. I'm using my handy dandy quilter's ruler as my little pointer today. So you're going to need gold, you're going to need 4 reds, then you're going to cut out 2 different size rectangles from your background, and you're going to need 4 of each of those, 4 blue squares, and 2 brown rectangles. And your instructions tell you exactly what size to cut those and how many to cut of each. Then we're going to start by making our Cat's Cradle block. So the part of the square that we're making that's the Cat's Cradle is this little corner piece right here. This is your Cat's Cradle block. Every single month you're going to have some variation of this Cat's Cradle block. So this month we are making 4 Cat's Cradle blocks, and they're going in each corner. Then in the center, in between each Cat's Cradle block, is going to be a little fence rail block. And then you're going to have your gold center in the middle. So like I said, you can mix up your colors any way you want, but that's how your block is going to go together. And it is so much fun. It's fast, it's easy, the instructions are very clear. And every month I'm going to show you step by step how to go through each and every block. So if you have any questions, you know how to get in touch with me, and I'm always happy to help you out. So let's get started. Start by cutting out your fabric pieces. Once you get all those cut, come back and I'll show you how to make your first Cat's Cradle block. It's so fun, and they come out perfect each and every time. So get started, get cutting, and I'll see you back here in a minute. Aren't you excited? You've got all your pieces cut out, and now you're ready to sew your first block. The first thing that you're going to do is pull out your instructions, and it is going to tell you which pieces you need to make your Cat's Cradle block, and that's what your little Cat's Cradle block is going to look like. So you will need your blue squares, background rectangles, and 2 brown rectangles, and you'll need your Cat's Cradle ruler and you'll need the cat's cradle instruction sheet that came along with your ruler. But for right now, we're going to set aside the instruction sheet. Once you've got your pieces out, set aside your ruler, and your instructions are going to kind of just hang out by you right here. You're not going to use your two great big brown rectangles towards the end. The first thing you're going to do is take your background rectangles and add your blue squares. And we're going to line those up on the left-hand side of your rectangle. Doesn't really matter because you can flip it back and forth either way. But line them all up on the same side, just like this, right sides together, all set and ready to go. On each one, you're going to stitch on the left-hand side, connecting those two together, 1/4 inch seams, and then when you're done, you're going to press them toward the rectangles. So I'm going to go do that and come back and show you your next step. As you can see, I have my 4 rectangles sewn to my 4 squares. When I flip them over, I have my seams pressed toward the background. Now I'm going to take and I'm going to sew these together. I'm going to take one of these pieces and sew it to another. You can see that I'm putting the squares on opposite sides, and I'm just going to line them up together. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this one. Flip that right side up, make them right sides together. The squares are on opposite sides. Now I'm going to just stitch across the top at 1/4 inch. You have now sewn both of your pieces along this long line. When you open them up, you can see that your navy blue pieces are on either side and your rectangles are on opposing sides as well. This is a 1/4 inch seam. You haven't pressed anything because you have nowhere to press it to yet. Now what I'm going to do, and just breathe, you could do this, it's very simple. I'm going to fold this in half to find the center of this seam. So I want to know right where my center is on this seam. So I'm going to fold this in half and line up my 2 edges. And here is my little center. Now I'm going to take it, I'm going to clip. Yes, I'm going to clip. I'm going to slide my little scissors in there, and I'm going to trim right up to my stitching line. Don't go through it, just up to it, right in the center of that rectangle. So you can see it right here. You can see where I have my little nip right up to the center of, right in the center of that seam. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to go over to the ironing board and I'm going to press that. So you can see how that opens up a little bit there. This side is going to press, you're going to press your seam so your square here is nice and flat. You can see this seam presses toward the background. This seam is going to press toward the background. And the same on this one. So on the one that I haven't done, it's going to look like this. Now open it up. This seam is going to press this way and this seam will press that way. So I'm going to go and press this one so that we can do the next step. You're almost done making this cat's cradle block. Easy so far, right? You can do it. Go back and press these and then come back and I'll show you how to do the rest. Now you have both of your pieces pressed correctly. You can see that all of my blue is pressed toward the background. Now you get to use your cat's cradle ruler. Yay! And a Racine pen. So get out a Racine pen and your cat's cradle ruler. We are going to, I'm going to put this on the back of something white. Here we have something white. The lines that we're going to look for on the ruler at this time are this square. See how you have this square right here? That's going to line up with your squares on your blocks. So you can see how this says place on seam line, and then these dotted line or dashed lines are going to run along the edge of your fabric. And then once you've laid this on your block, you're going to, it says right here, mark seam line, and that's what we're going to do. So let me show you how to do that. We're going to take the block, and here is my seam line. Here's the line that says place on seam line. I'm going to lay that right down on there. You can see that I have my dotted line or dashed line lining up right along the edge of my fabric, and the seam line lines up right on the seam line of my square. I'm then going to just take and mark that line right there. I'm going to flip my block, do the same thing. You can tell my block is kitty wampus. It doesn't matter because we're going to trim this all up later on and it's going to be perfect. So my seam line is lined up with the seam line on my square. My dashed line is lined up on the edge of my fabric, and now I'm going to mark the diagonal line. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing on my next block. Line up my seam lines, line up the edge of my fabric with the dashed line, draw the line. You can do this, right? And it shows you how to do that in the instructions. Don't forget what you're doing this month, because next month you're going to do exactly the same thing. Every one of the cat's cradle blocks are put together in exactly the same way. You might use different colors, your squares might be a little bit different size, but every month you're going to take these same steps to make your cat's cradle block. All righty, now I've got that all set and ready to go. Now, the next thing we're going to do is take your brown square rectangles and line them up right sides together with the block you just made. Look at that. Matches up pretty perfectly. Does it? Well, again, doesn't matter because this is all going to get trimmed down when we're finished. If you want to pin this, feel free to pin it. I'm going to take these two over. I've got them right sides together, and I'm going to stitch right on the lines that I drew. Okay, do that, come back, and you're going to have your cat's cradle block just about done. Once we do this, we're going to press it, and then we are going to square it up, and you will have your cat's cradle block done. It's that fast and easy. So see you in a few. You can now see my rectangle has been sewn. I sewed right on the lines that I drew with my Racine pen. Now, using the ruler, that, you know, your cat's cradle ruler, you can use any ruler, I'm going to line up this 1/4 inch seam line right along the edge that I just sewed, and that's going to trim that seam down to 1/4 inch. So I'm going to trim that one and then trim right along the seam that I just sewed, lining that line up, the 1/4 inch line right up with that, and you get about that much left over. Now when I open this up, I have a cat's cradle block. And I did the other two and I pressed them. Look at how perfect that point is. Each and every time. It is perfect. Now these two are a little bit too big. We're going to cut these down to 4 inch. So we're going to make we're going to trim this down like this. So we're going to use, let me show you how to do this. So it says trim size. So we're going to line up our square in this 4 inch size. Some months it'll be a different size, but this month we're going to trim them up to the 4 inch trim size. That means your block will be 4 inches when it's finished, 4.5 unfinished. So this diagonal line right here is going to line up with the diagonal line on our block, and the square is going to line up with the square right here. So let me show you how that works. We're going to trim that up, and we're going to be good to go. Those will be just perfect. So now you can see that I have lined up I start with lining up the diagonal, and then get my square edge lined up here, and get my diagonal lined up there. Right along the diagonal seam line, square is lined up with the square. Now I can trim here and here. So you can see it's a little bit bigger, so then I can trim off all that stuff that was a little bit kitty wampus earlier on. Now I'm going to turn my block, and I'm going to do kind of the same thing. I'm just going to take and line up the other side. So here we have kind of an X running through. This is going to line up right in the center of my square. So you can see how just perfect these lines go right through each point. But now I want to trim off the other side. So I'm going to do the same thing. I just take my diagonal line, line it up from here to here. On that diagonal line, trim off this extra. Right here and here. And now I have a perfect 4.5 inch unfinished square. Let me show you how to do that one more time. I'm going to take the 4-inch square and the diagonal and line that up on my block. Start out by kind of lining up your diagonal and then line up your square with your square, the 4-incher, and then we're going to trim it down. Oops, it moved a little bit on me there. If you have problems with your rulers, with this ruler sliding, use some quick grip on it. We have that quick grip spray, and that grippy spray works great and helps to keep your ruler from slipping around. Now I'm going to flip it, do the same thing here, line up the diagonal line with this, and actually right along this edge where I'm cutting, you can see that it's kind of shaded. That shading is the anti-skid stuff that they put on the ruler so that it helps to keep it from sliding. And it also has little dots here, here, and here. And these little things right there are an anti-grip, and these are also anti-grip. So that helps, or anti-slip, I should say. So that will help your ruler to not slip around as you're cutting. And look at these two beautiful blocks. Now I'm going to go and press these. Remember to press your seam toward the dark side, towards your dark triangle, and go and trim them, and you will have beautiful blocks. Then I'll come back and show you how to put the rest of the block together. You now have the hardest part done. You made your cat's cradle squares, and don't they look beautiful? Your points are beautiful. These are exactly 4.5 inches, and now you're ready to sew your whole block together. I've laid out the block so you can see how it looks and how it goes together. I'm now going to take my red rectangle and my background rectangles and sew those together. So I have those here, here, side, and bottom. And I'm going to lay those right on top of one another, sew it 1/4 inch, press it toward the red, and come back, and then you'll be ready to sew the entire block together. Wasn't that fast? It's so fast and so beautiful when it's done. Now I've sewn all my these are called fence rail units. So I've sewed all my fence rail units together. I pressed my seam toward the red. Now I've laid out my block, and now I'm going to sew the whole block together. I'll sew this row, these 3, and then these 3. I will press, and when I press my seams, I'm going to press all of my seams toward the fence rail units as I go along. So I'm going to go back, do that, and then I'll come back and show you how it looks. I now have all 3 rows all sewn together. If I flip these over, you'll see I pressed toward the fence rail blocks. Alrighty, flip it back, right sides together. Now, as I sew these together, these centers will nest right inside one another, and I'm going to sew all 3 of these pieces together. Look at how beautiful that looks already. I'm not even done. Alrighty, let's stitch that, and you will be done with your first block. It's going to be beautiful. Here is your beautiful finished block. All my points are beautiful, just like yours will be. And as you press this block at the end, you're going to press your rows toward the center as you go along. So this is your block. You are all ready for month number 2. We will see you next month, second Monday of the month, or second Monday of the month, third Monday of the month for our So What Block of the Month Club. See you then.